Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and once again it's time for the Q&As, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. Hey Jason, what are your thoughts on using kettlebell swings both as conditioning and as volume work for the posterior chain? I've recently read of 2 equipped lifters with 3,000 pound totals that use swings extensively. Kind of complicated as far as the volume work for the posterior chain, because at the end of the day you have to remember you're only going to build so much muscle with really high rep work. It shouldn't be your primary modality, but it can help. So if you're talking about conditioning or your general physical preparedness, there's no debate about that. To my knowledge, asking if you can use kettlebell swings for Metcon or GPP work is not controversial. I've never heard anyone suggest otherwise, and very, very large numbers of very successful strength and conditioning coaches regularly have athletes do kettlebell swings for conditioning. So again, that's one of those questions you look at and say, well, why would you even ask that? It's kind of common knowledge. So, it's fine. A lot of times people don't know that. Maybe you don't follow a lot of strength and conditioning circles, and that's okay. But that one's not even controversial, right? No strength and conditioning coach is going to tell you no to that one. It's perfectly reasonable, and it's a very, very good form of conditioning, right? Very, very high rep kettlebell swings. We're talking sets of 100 plus. Great conditioning work. Now, as far as building your posterior chain, we can argue about ultra high reps in terms of any hypertrophic response. What do I mean ultra high? I don't mean 20 or 30. I'm talking the really high rep stuff. It's questionable. So the question I would ask is, how heavy are your kettlebells? Okay, if you're going to use kettlebell swings to actually really strengthen the posterior chain, I'm going to say you probably need a kettlebell that you're going to be reaching failure by 30 to 35 reps. Okay, and depending upon how strong you are, that might require a pretty heavy kettlebell. So the question I kind of ask is your gym equipped for that? Right? Does your gym have a kettlebell heavy enough for you to start hitting failure on rep 25 or 30? Okay, that's what we have to ask. And if not, do you have them at home? And even then, I would say, man, that's not necessarily a good investment of money. Kettlebells are really, really, really expensive right now due to the costs online. Like I've looked at kettlebells even to add a few smaller ones, and they are ludicrously priced for what they are. They're just a cast hunk of crap. Realistically, they should be cheap. They're cheaper to make than weight plates, like cast iron plates. They shouldn't cost more than cast iron weight plates, and they do right now per pound. So that's kind of the issue you run into. It's like, oh man, I'm going to need several kettlebells to have a little bit of progression here and to be able to program. And before long, you find yourself $300-400 deep in kettlebells. And depending on what your budget's like, that may or may not be a good investment. And then the floor space, and then those heavier kettlebells, and you have singles, they're not going to be useful for anything but stuff like that. So there's a problem you run into is a practicality one. But I would say if you have the appropriate kettlebells, could they contribute to your volume work for posterior chain? Absolutely. Absolutely, unquestioningly. But you should be doing other stuff too, like good mornings and deadlifts and things like that, right? And if we start talking about spending $400+ when you're at that point, you should just go ahead and buy a reverse hyper. Right? If you have in the range of $400 to just throw towards posterior chain strengthening for your home gym, buy a reverse hyper. Problem solved. It's more useful. All right, next question. Would you have an athlete that train in their sport 5 to 6 times a week perform the deadlift, which may impact recovery, or would you get close to the same benefits from back squats and good mornings without impacting recovery so much? Let me ask you a very, very simple question. You watch how I train, right? How often do you see me perform a heavy taxing deadlift of any type? Do you see me really doing rep work on the deadlift? Very rarely, maybe for a short phase. I don't perform the deadlift in a way that's taxing because I'm an athlete training for strength sports. I don't sit around doing heavy deadlifts all the time these days. I do one heavy deadlift, 1 rep every 3 weeks. Right? And for a while I would do it every other week, but now I'm working a good morning in. That's how you should be training. We do speed pulls, right? So you see that I wrote speed pulls down below. And again, if you come back over to what I say on the channel, what other people do, you look at all the conjugate stuff. West Side guys teach it. Viata has hybrid athletes do it. Joe DeFranco had all these NFL guys doing it, right? So step back and think about that. Don't people who run conjugate regularly do tons of conditioning and other stuff? Right? Yeah. So it's very similar to in some ways sport specific practice. So we're not saying you should nail if you need to be able to pull from the floor. You don't need to be doing all out sets of 5. But even then, pulling to a max on a variation every couple of weeks for 1 rep, that's not going to bury your ability to do a sport. It's going to help you learn to maximize force production. Right? Run the normal conjugate system and do speed pulls. Speed pulls do not impact your recovery, and I want to make that very clear. Even when I do speed pulls to where my lockout is over 500 pounds and I do a bunch of singles, right? It's not fatiguing at all. Speed pulls are not fatiguing. They don't beat up your recovery. They don't use a lot of recovery resources. They give a great training response, but we use the speed pulls to build our deadlift and to even build the technical aspects of the deadlift, right? We need that, and we need the muscle mass to build so that when we do test and max, it goes up. So hypertrophy work, and meaning the good mornings and stuff, upper back work, speed pulls. So why don't you just do speed pulls like I recommend and like I do? Meaning you're basically asking a question of, should athletes train different than how you train or how you recommend? Because speed pulls don't impact recovery, and 99%, well 95% of our pulls from the floor are going to be speed pulls. Okay? So let's make that clear. That's what you need to be doing. All right, next question. Hey coach, I'm 41 and have been lifting for 2 years. I also box for conditioning. I have issues with pain in my elbows. I take collagen, but it still gets inflamed. I lift full body twice a week. I only have dumbbells currently. I do overhead press, bench, your favorite, the Bulgarian split squats, LOL, rows, and RDLs. Can you help me? I don't want to not be able to work out. Well, you probably don't have enough variation. You're probably getting, number one, some overuse because of what you have available. Okay, you don't have any variation. If you just have dumbbells and you do what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 exercises. Okay, you're doing 5 exercises and you only train twice a week. You're doing the same movements, the exact same movements twice a week for long term. All right, number one, we're running into some overuse. I'm going to say, if you want to get serious about lifting, you need access to a little more equipment. It's going to make you a better boxer. It's going to make you healthier and fitter. You're not going to be able to develop the strength and the performance and everything else that we really want with just dumbbells. Okay, so that's something you need to work on, and I understand in the current world situation that's rough. So let's talk about your elbows. Getting inflammation in your tendons. High rep band press downs. Get you some mini bands. Now I understand the good companies are mostly out of stock these days until everything gets stocked up. We've dealt with all these lockdowns and people buying everything. I know. It's hard. Fortunately, I haven't broken any bands. I need every band I have. So what do? Go get some cheaper bands then. Now, I am not always a fan of those cheap tubular bands that you get at your local store. You can get at Walmart, Academy, whatever. Local sporting goods stores. Better than nothing. You can't get access to the good bands like Rogue or Elite FTS. And do not buy those cheap flat bands off Amazon. Do not do it. Trust me, they're garbage. You need good bands. But the round tubular bands will work a little better than those. We'll get you a couple of them different thicknesses and start doing high rep band press downs off of a chin-up bar or something every single day. At least 30 reps. You need to start getting blood flow to those tendons. You need to start building those tendons up all around your elbow and where the triceps insert. It might even be bicep tendons also contributing. Start doing the same thing for your biceps. You need to get in and do a bunch of band work to build up that connective tissue. It would behoove you to do so, and you need more exercise variation. Drop this silly minimalist stuff. Drop it. You're going to do better on real programming with access to more stuff and getting some actual barbell work and things in. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time in part 2.